I'd like to start with Robert first. And my question for you is, where were you when you heard that Baba dropped his body, and how did that affect you?
I think I alluded to it last night, but I was actually in a hospital in Berkeley, having been unwell, and got a telephone call from Alan Cohen informing me that Baba had dropped his body. Louder? Yeah. Alan Cohen had called and told me that Baba dropped his body, and at first it was, of course, disbelief, shock, and tears, and then a slowly growing sense of Baba being infinite, being everywhere, being universal. That rather than that dear form in India that he said he put on as a clothes to make himself visible to us, that it was now he was everywhere, and we had to find him wherever we were.
What I was saying, that Harry Kenmore was one of the people that came from the West to join in the internment of Baba. When we got the message, that is my brother Edward and I didn't know that Baba could still be seen and that he had not been covered, because the message that came was sent by Adi, in which he said in a telegram that MeherBaba had dropped his physical body to live eternally in the hearts of his lovers everywhere, and that his body has been interned in his tomb, which he had ordered to be built for him long ago. That's what the telegram said. And so when we got the message, we thought that Baba had been covered, and the only thing that I had in my mind was to go there, to be there. And I'm just going to skip over everything, which is a really nice story because I don't know how much time we have here. But,
You don't have to skip. Okay.
Well, it'll...
Robert's willing to give you the time.
Okay. Well, what I would like to say then is just to first say what happened when I heard about Baba dropping his body. It was a day that I was driving a taxi in New York, because that's what I did at that time. And I had gotten fairly tired of driving a taxi and was looking for an opportunity not to have to do that anymore and to do something else. Well, the day that Baba left his physical body, I didn't know that. I took the taxi out early in the morning, as I would normally do. And that particular day, not one single person wanted to get into my taxi. I drove maybe for about 6 hours, and not one single person hailed the cab, which I thought was absolutely amazing and phenomenal, because it never happened in all the time that I had ever driven before. So I decided that day that I would never drive a taxi again. And I decided also to take the car in early, back to the garage, and just turn it in, and that would be the last time I'd ever drive a taxi. So when, after I turned it in, I called up some friends of mine, Baba lovers, and I thought I would just visit them and just sort of relax from the day's non-event. And the first thing that they said was, did you hear the news? Did you hear the news? And at that time, there was a lot of news coming from India in regards to the last darshan, which Baba was planning to have a few months later. But, so I said, I don't know, there's been quite a bit of news. So what is it? And then it was Joyce Barrison that, and at that time she was with David, and they told me that Baba, that a telegram had come, that Baba had left his physical body. And I said, well, no, I hadn't heard that. And I asked them to read it, and they did. And I remember after the first time they read the message, I thought about it as to whether, is this real? Is this really something that has happened, or is it just maybe they're putting me on somewhat? But then, so I asked them to read it again, because the second time I would hear it, I had the feeling and awareness of how Baba communicated and the kind of way he spoke. And then I listened to the message again, and I thought, yes, this is real. Baba does communicate like this. This is the style in which he speaks. So I decided not to go over to their place. Instead, I went over to Fred and Ella Winnefeld's home, which was the group leader or group head in New York, where I was. And they confirmed it. And they were getting so many calls at the time from all over the country, because apparently there was a little newspaper statement that had gotten on the Associated Press, or one of those press services. I'm not remembering exactly which one, but it had in there that Baba had, it was just a little maybe 1 or 2 inches in the paper, which said that Meher Baba had died in a cave that was, and he had been silent and didn't speak. And that was basically the notice that the newspaper had, and they carried in various papers. So people were calling Fred and Ella, what is this? Because first of all, they knew that Baba was not in a cave. And it seemed very strange that something like that would be in the paper. But they did confirm, of course, that Baba had left his body, but not in the cave. He had left it in Meherzad. Well, it was then that my brother and I decided that we would leave for India, and as soon as we could, to be there. Now, it's important to understand that there were many people waiting for this darshan to come up. I mean, there was going to be some hundreds of people from the West, and however many from the East, which would probably be thousands. But from the West, there were hundreds that planned to meet Baba for the first time, many of them, and some would be meeting him again. But now that he left his physical body, my first thought was, isn't Baba so slippery? You never know what he's going to do. And if we look back on it, there were many indications that Baba gave about his wanting, that he would be leaving the body. I mean, he indicated it, but he didn't say it. And I could see for good reason what an excitement that would have created if he would have actually said such a thing. But anyhow, the news was given out by the group heads in particularly for the larger groups, that Baba lovers should not go right now to India because it would be too much for the Mandali, Baba's disciples, to really handle this, that so many people should come. And I remember thinking at the time, no, this is absurd. I really did think that. Even though they meant well, that's not it at all. I'm Baba's son, and if I want to be there at the father's internment and entombment, that's where I belong. And my brother and I both thought, we're not going to make ourselves a burden on anybody. We'll take care of ourselves, and if anyone, we'll just go there to be there. And that was my thinking. We left. And when I got there, I remember that Erich was one of the first people that we saw. And he asked us immediately, he said, well, come, we have to go into Baba's Samadhi. And I saw thousands of people there in lines, you know, waiting to get into the Samadhi. So I felt a little odd that, you know, I should be coming into the Samadhi in front of everybody. But he said, no, I want you to come straight in. So we were brought in, and he said to me, where are all the Westerners? Because only 5 had come, of which we were 2 of them, which was Harry Kenmore and Ann Conlon and Fred Winnefeld. And
Don Stevens. I think Don Stevens was there.
But no, I mean from the States. I think Don was in England at the time. There, and Delia was there also from England. But from the States, yeah, oh yeah, that's right, Alan Cohn. So there was another one here. Who? All right, well, it turns out that there was more than 5. Okay. There were very few. There were very, very few. I'm going to change that to a few. Considering how many people there were, I'd say maybe, I've upped it to 7 now. But anyhow, we did get there, and Erich asked, where are all the Westerners? There was so many thousands of Easterners. I said, well, the word was out that we shouldn't be coming because it would be too much for you all, Mandali and others, to put the people up. And in the meantime, we're looking around and there's thousands of people here. So a few hundred more wasn't going to make a difference. So we went into the tomb, and I must say this, that when I got there, the atmosphere was so high, it was so beautiful, it was not like someone had died, and there was remorse and weeping and sadness and all of that. It was quite the opposite, I felt, that it was one of great joy and freedom and release for Baba. He was quite capable of doing his work in and out of his body, and many times he, and I was present where he said that he wasn't the body, and he shouldn't be mixed up with being the physical body alone. He used his body for his work, but he was not that. And I could see that, well, Baba's spirit and his presence was very strong, really strong. And Harry Kenmore, which is what I started to say earlier, came out and made one statement that was really wonderful, and it was so true. He said, this is intoxicating. This is intoxicating. And it really was. It was so intoxicating to be there. And it went on like that, I think, for 3 or 4 days. Well, the day I arrived was the last day that Baba was actually to be seen open. And it was a surprise for my brother and I to see this, because we were under the impression that Baba had been covered. And then we were seeing, well, he hasn't. You know, there you could see Baba's face, and he was lying in the crypt of the tomb. And he had previously said that when he left his physical body, that it should be left, that it should be placed in this tomb that he had ordered to be built for himself long ago. And that this tomb, this place, would one day become the greatest place of pilgrimage in the world, because this Advent would be his greatest one, and since it was at the end of a cycle of time and the beginning of a new cycle. So there we saw Baba, and he was lying there, and it was quite hot that day, in spite of the fact that it was in January, but it was really hot. And they had put ice around Baba inside the crypt, and there may be some photos. I know there are photos showing that. But the ice never touched Baba. It wasn't placed to touch him. It was just there to keep things cooler, because Baba had been in there on the day I arrived. It was February 7th. Baba left his body on January 31st of 1969. Now it was February 7th. And he had been there for 7 days. And there was, normally when a person dies, they have to be immediately covered, maybe after 24, 36 hours, because there are certain odors and there's fluids that can come out of the openings of the face and other openings. And so you have to do that. But with Baba, there wasn't any of that. And it was one of the reasons why, because so many people were coming, that they wanted to keep Baba away to be seen like this, so they could people could pay their last respects. So but the day I arrived was the day he was to be covered, and I actually got there at 11 o'clock, and Baba was covered at 12:15. You see, so one might say I got there at the 11th hour, right under the wire, and never knowing that Baba wasn't covered in the first place. So now I was there, and by the way, Rick Chapman was there too. Now
It's 26.
I think that's number 8. And we each had a cord. The way they had it was that the lid of the box was under Baba. That was placed there first. Baba was placed on top of that. And then the box itself that was inverted to be lowered over Baba like this. And that's how Baba was covered by that box. And then the earth was placed over Baba, and and flowers were placed on the box. And then as the earth was being put in there, there were also steps that went down, which have all been since covered up. Now it's flat, and then later a marble stone was placed over the entire earth. But at that time, there was just the earth, and there was a beautiful cloth that would be placed on top of the earth. And so people would bow down or pay their respects to Baba with the with that cloth, and flowers that would be placed over it, and the artis would be sung, and much of what is done today was done then. But it was Mehera that had decided that on February 7th, on that day, that Baba should be covered. And also they played Begin to Begin. This was another thing that Baba wanted played a number of times. And Mehera saw to it that that was played. It was one of Baba's favorite songs, of a Western song. So I was able to help in lowering this box over Baba. And I must say something personal about that. I never thought that I would ever be there to help cover the avatar. This is something that was beyond my imagination, that I would ever be a part of something like that. One might equate it to, say, being there to help bury Jesus at the time when that happened, or any other great master avatar like Lord Krishna. I mean, now it was MeherBaba. And there was just basically a handful of us that were there to do that. There were 4 ropes that were from different corners of that box, and a few of us would each hold 1 rope and gradually lower it over Baba. And people had some really amazing experiences, which they told me. There was one Zoroastrian priest that later said, when I was talking to him afterwards, that it was really against his religion to be there for doing this here. That is, to come to the place of someone that claimed to be the master, or Zoroaster even. And he said that he had an experience of vision in which he saw a great soul. You know, sorry, but I can't remember his vision precisely, but there was a great soul involved. And he saw that he was to be there, to go there. And then he went to see where Meher Baba was because he had heard about this. And he went to this, there. And then he told me this, and this part I remember, that when he couldn't see over the heads of the crowds that were in front when Baba was still lying in state. This was before he was covered. He couldn't see over the heads of the crowd. And he saw that Baba actually lifted himself up to sit up so that he could see him over the head. This was his personal experience. And he felt that, that this was certainly the one whom he was to come and see. And he told me he even came at great risk because if his congregation of people that, you know, didn't believe in such things were to know this, they would be very unhappy about it because it was not his role to do that. But he wanted to do it. And then he also felt that he was to say the Zoroastrian prayers for Baba because Baba was Zoroastrian. And the Parsi players, which he did it, and he did it, you know, in his own way over there at that time. So it seemed like Baba had every scene covered. Now, when, including his own funeral. So the thing was that this ice, as I said, before he was covered, was put around Baba, but it didn't touch him. It was just there to keep the tomb cool. But then on the ice was also sawdust. It was all over the ice to absorb any water so it wouldn't go over to where, you know, onto Baba. And then afterwards, that ice was taken out, and so we were one of the people which was in the line where the ice was passed out so that preparation could be made to actually lower the box and then put it over Baba and all like that. This was my experience of the first Amartithi, and at that time it was not called Amartithi. There was no such name like that on that first Amartithi. That was a name that was given later, and it was a very unexpected event, to say the least. The many thousands of people that came, of Baba's lovers from far and wide that did come, was amazing to feel the atmosphere and Baba's presence on the tomb for those days that he was there. You know, I mean, that was the dropping of the body. Now, one last thing I want to say about that. Meher, you know, it's not to say that everybody didn't feel any sadness. It was, I would say that most of us didn't. But the one who did feel the absolute pain of Baba's leaving his body was Meher. And most likely some of the other Mandali that actually lived with Baba as resident Mandali. They knew him in a very personal and extremely human way. And I'm sure that their hearts were pretty well cut as a result of losing his physical form. While for me, I didn't really live with Baba. I saw Baba on various visits, and I knew him more in his divine aspect, for who he said he really is beyond the form, but also had the opportunity of seeing him informed. And so both was there, but I felt the joy of his release at that time. But I think that Meher absolutely felt the pain of losing his human side, his human form. And then gradually, as the years went by, that seemed to fade, and she came more and more out and would talk, and so many of you had met Meher, and really shared so many stories of what it was to be with Baba during his life, and then, you know, lost the pain over a period of time. At least it didn't show. So that is some of what happened during that visit.
Okay, we already have a question. Chris Marie?
Yeah, two real short things. One is, what did the box look like that covered him, and the other is, was anyone allowed to touch him, physically touch him while he was before he was coming?
Well, the box was really a very, so far as I remember, it was a plain, like pine box that was lowered over him. There was nothing fancy about it. As far as touching him, you could go down the steps, and Baba was wrapped in cloth. It was only his face that you could see, and so you could touch the cloth like that where his feet were, and most likely we did. And also there were flowers put on Baba before the box was lowered, and then there were flowers put, you know, each one threw a flower on the box afterwards, when it once was put on over him.
When Baba dropped the body, as the Mongoli realized what they had to do, and there was different opinions among them about what to do. Apparently, initially, Mehra wanted to keep Baba's body at Meherzad for several days in Mandalay Hall, and that was discussed. Mehra said no, that he remembered that Baba said that to bring his body to Meherabad. And Chuggan was sent post-haste to Ahmednagar to have the box made in record time, especially in India, so that it would be available once they got to the Samadhi, and about the ambulance being called and so forth. There was a lot of details that were done very quickly and without previous preparation, because of course none of them expected Baba to drop the body, despite all the hints that he had given that his work was done, that his time was put here, and that his, as he said, this was his crucifixion. That he reminded, even in the last moments, that he reminded the Mandali, remember I am God. And even the day before, he had some fun with Kaka, with the Mandali present, and bring Kaka into the room, who had developed a very high nitrogen in his urine and had affected his speech. And Baba had Kaka say, Sai Baba, Baba Jan, Meher Baba. And he slurred it, Kaka slurred it because of the speech impediment from his illness, and it gave Baba great amusement. And this was January 30th. So I remember those details. And of course, as Irwin said, many of us were getting ready to go to 69 Darshan. The announcement had been made, the circulars had all been sent. People were getting their money together, getting their lives together. The jets had been chartered. I mean, it was all over the country and Europe. That this was the dominant thought in everyone's minds, that especially for those who had not yet met Baba, this was going to be the great opportunity, that Baba was going to have the great darshan. And of course, with Baba dropping the body, it created a lot of turmoil. No doubt Baba doing it intentionally. He gave us the slip. And there were many varied reactions to this, of people being more determined to go, while others canceling, and deciding that if Baba wasn't going to be there, why go? I think everyone who was present at that time, and were involved in getting ready to go to Darshan, everybody has their own story of how that time was, and how topsy-turvy Baba's sudden departure created for everyone concerned. Did you end up going on 69 Darshan?
Yes, I
In
was
the
there.
spring?
We never left.
You never left, that's right.
That's right. Once we went, we stayed. When we had come to the helped cover to the Baba's burial, one might say, at the Samadhi, we didn't leave because the order that Baba had given was that you could go anywhere you wanted prior to the darshan, which would be for 1 week for each group. Each group could come for 1 week, or whoever came could come for 1 week. And they could go anywhere they wanted prior to the darshan, which was to be held in Pune at Guru Prasad. It was not in Meherabad, where Baba was taken when he dropped his body. So, so we decided that since we could be anywhere before the darshan, we'll stay at Meherabad. And so we lived there for a few months until the darshan period started. And then when it started, even then there was some weeks that, how many weeks did it go for? About 4 weeks?
From April 10th to June 10th.
To June 10th. So we stayed right up till the last possible week that we could stay before going to Pune to take the darshan at Guru Prasad. And from there, then we left and went back because that was Baba's order. You could go anywhere you wanted before, but once you took darshan, you had to leave and go back to your home before going anywhere else. And so we did it like that. So we were actually there maybe for 4 months. Yeah, 4 months as a result.
Now, Robert, you have a story that you want to tell about this?
Well, I said it affected everyone. How it affected me was when I heard that Baba dropped the body, I had also put my deposit down to go with the Northern California group. And when I heard that Baba wasn't going to be present, as it were, at least visible, I canceled. I said, what for? Why go? I'd already met Baba happily, and to go to see the Mandali didn't seem of enough effort, especially given that my financial state at the time. Of course, now I go as often as possible for those reasons, but it's been a progress, a work in progress. I was very close with Fred and Ella Winterfeld, whom Baba had initially put me in touch with in New York. And I remember that the Northern California group left on Easter morning, Easter Sunday at dawn. And I'd gone to the airport to see them off with a couple of other people who weren't going to the darshan program. And we went up to the top of Mount Tam and Easter Sunday and said Baba's prayers and wished them bon voyage. And later that day, I called Fred and Ella to tell them that the Northern California flight, which was the first group going from the States, had left successfully and were en route. And Fred's comment to me was, "But Robert, why weren't you on the flight?" And I said I had no money, that Baba wasn't there, I didn't seem to be where I was going, I was sick at the time. And he said, I'm looking at the list of all the people going, and your name isn't on it. Baba would be very unhappy not to see your name on the list. You must come. I said, but how? The flight's gone. So he says, don't worry, I'll call you back soon. So within a couple of hours, I get a telephone call informing me that Phyllis Frederick was ill and couldn't go on the Myrtle Beach flight, which she had signed up for, and she was giving me her ticket. That I could pay her back over as much time as I needed, in whatever amounts I could muster, and that I was to take her seat. And he said, we've already posted a round trip ticket to New York for you to come meet the Myrtle Beach flight. You're going to India for darshan. I just started crying. And of course, did go, happily. As a footnote, when I got back, I've learned that an accident case that I'd been in a couple years before had just come through, and I'd received a check for the damages, and it exactly to the dollar covered the price of the ticket. And so I sent the money to Phyllis and paid her in full immediately. So that was my story.
Yeah, I have just a little aside. I've been involved with the Youth Sahavas in Myrtle Beach since its inception, and the last couple of years I've had the volunteer, the worker walls who kind of are the backbone and keep things going so the kids can enjoy themselves. Right, Steph? And we stay at Dilruba, which was Kitty and Elizabeth's home. And the first year we were in there was 2 years ago, and we snuck up to the attic. And we found all these receipts. There were these logs of all the people who went to Darshan from Myrtle Beach. And some of the kids found their parents' names. It was pretty exciting. So they kept everything. Those logs are still there in the attic.